April 22nd, 1945, Okinawa, Japan. Marine Scout Sergeant William Manchester crouches in a shell crater, watching 400 Japanese soldiers dig defensive positions just 300 yards ahead. His mission is simple in theory, suicidal in practice. Cross this open ground in broad daylight, penetrate enemy lines, and map their artillery positions. The intelligence is critical. American forces are planning a major assault in 72 hours, and without accurate coordinates, thousands of Marines will walk into a killing zone. Manchester checks his watch. 1340 hours, 4 hours of daylight remaining. The terrain offers no cover, just burned sugarcane fields and red Okinawan clay. Every other scout sent on similar missions in the past week has been killed or pinned down. The casualty rate for Marine reconnaissance patrols on Okinawa stands at 68%. Division intelligence has already written off this mission as impossible. But Manchester has something in his pack that no regulation permits, that his commanding officer explicitly forbade, that every military manual says violates the laws of war. It's a small tin container, hand-mixed in a bombed-out schoolhouse 3 nights ago. Inside is a paste that shouldn't work, that defies every principle of camouflage the Marine Corps teaches. What he doesn't know is that his illegal concoction will revolutionize military reconnaissance, save thousands of lives in the Pacific War, and remain classified for the next 18 years. The formula he's about to test will eventually become standard issue for every special operations unit in the world, from Navy SEALs to British SAS, and the principles behind it will transform how modern militaries think about concealment. But right now, in this crater on Okinawa, William Manchester is just a 22-year-old college dropout with a chemistry hobby, about to commit what the Marine Corps considers a war crime. The Pacific War has a fatal problem, and it's killing Marines by the hundreds. Since the island-hopping campaign began in 1943, American forces have struggled with a seemingly unsolvable tactical challenge. How do you gather intelligence on enemy positions when the enemy can see you coming from a mile away? Traditional camouflage works in European forests, where soldiers can blend into green foliage and brown earth. But Pacific Islands present a kaleidoscope of colors: red volcanic soil, white coral sand, black lava rock, yellow-green tropical vegetation, all under intense equatorial sunlight that makes shadows harsh and contrast extreme. The Marine Corps solution has been to send reconnaissance patrols at night, but Japanese forces, masters of nocturnal warfare, have turned darkness into their advantage. They set up interlocking fields of fire, use noise discipline, and employ patient listening posts that detect American movement. Night reconnaissance on islands like Peleliu and Iwo Jima has produced horrific casualties. At Peleliu, Marine reconnaissance units suffered 83% casualties in the first week. Daylight reconnaissance seems impossible. The standard Marine Corps camouflage, olive drab uniforms with green and brown face paint, stands out like a beacon against Pacific terrain. Experiments with lighter colors have failed. Sand-colored uniforms show up against vegetation. White works on coral, but nowhere else. Mixed patterns create an obvious artificial appearance that draws fire. Military camouflage experts, trained at Fort Benning's Camouflage School, insist the solution is better fabric patterns and improved uniform design. They've tested dozens of variations. All have failed in combat. The consensus among experts is clear. Effective daylight reconnaissance in the Pacific is tactically impossible. The human eye is too good at detecting movement and contrast. The solution, they argue, is better night vision equipment and more aggressive nighttime tactics. The stakes couldn't be higher. As American forces approach the Japanese home islands, intelligence gathering becomes critical. Okinawa is the final stepping stone before the invasion of mainland Japan. Japanese defenders have had months to fortify positions, dig elaborate tunnel systems, and pre-register artillery on every approach route. Without accurate reconnaissance, American casualties in the planned invasion of Japan are projected to exceed 1 million. By April 1945, the situation has become desperate. Marine Division commanders are demanding solutions. The official response from the Quartermaster Corps is that new camouflage uniforms are in development and will be ready for field testing in 6 to 8 months, long after the war's outcome will be decided. William Manchester didn't plan to become a Marine. He certainly didn't plan to revolutionize military camouflage. In 1942, he's a 19-year-old sophomore at the University of Massachusetts, studying chemistry with mediocre grades and no particular direction. His professors describe him as intellectually curious but undisciplined. He spends more time experimenting with homemade photographic developers in his dorm room than attending lectures. When Pearl Harbor happens, Manchester does what millions of young men do. He enlists. The Marine Corps doesn't care about his chemistry background. They need riflemen. Manchester goes through boot camp at Parris Island, shows aptitude for marksmanship, and gets assigned to a rifle company. He's shipped to the Pacific in early 1943, sees combat at Guadalcanal, and distinguishes himself not through heroics, but through an odd talent. He's exceptionally good at not being seen. While other Marines bunch up, move carelessly, and draw fire. Manchester seems to understand instinctively how to use terrain, how to move during enemy reloads, how to blend into backgrounds. His squad leader notices. By 1944, Manchester is pulled into reconnaissance work. He's good at it, but he's also frustrated. The camouflage doesn't work. He watches friends die because they're visible against terrain that should hide them. The moment of insight comes in March 1945, during a rest period on Okinawa. Manchester is watching a local Okinawan woman working in a field, and he notices something odd. Even though she's wearing bright clothing, she's surprisingly hard to track visually. He realizes it's because the colors, while bright, match the color temperature and intensity of the surrounding environment. It's not about being dark or light. It's about matching the light itself. Manchester starts experimenting. He begs, borrows, and steals art supplies from a bombed-out school. Watercolors, pastels, clays. He begins mixing compounds, testing them against different backgrounds, studying how they look under direct sunlight versus shade. His fellow Marines think he's lost his mind. His sergeant tells him to stop wasting time on art projects. But Manchester has remembered something from his college chemistry courses, the principle of metamerism, where colors can appear identical under certain lighting conditions, even though they're composed of different pigments. If he can create a paint that matches the spectral reflectance of Okinawan terrain under tropical sunlight, it might achieve something no military camouflage has ever accomplished: true visual integration with the environment. Manchester sets up his laboratory in a destroyed schoolhouse 3 miles behind the front lines. His equipment consists of stolen watercolors, local clay, charcoal from burned buildings, rice powder from abandoned supplies, and animal fat rendered from rations. He has no measuring instruments except his eyes and a homemade color wheel made from cardboard. The Marine Corps camouflage regulations are explicit. Only approved face paints may be used. The standard issue is a 2-color compact, olive drab and loam brown. The regulations exist for a reason. In World War I, some soldiers experimented with unauthorized camouflage containing toxic compounds. Others used materials that reflected infrared light, making them visible to enemy night vision equipment. The rules are clear. Unauthorized camouflage materials constitute a violation of Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Manchester doesn't care. He's watched too many friends die. His first attempts fail spectacularly. A mixture heavy on white clay makes him look like a ghost. A red clay-based formula works against bare soil, but stands out against vegetation. He realizes the problem. He's trying to match specific colors when he should be matching light values and color temperature. The breakthrough comes on April 19, 1945. Manchester creates a base using rice powder mixed with rendered fat, then adds carefully measured amounts of red Okinawan clay, charcoal, and yellow pigment extracted from local flowers. The result is a strange beige-gray-pink color that looks wrong in the schoolhouse, but when he tests it outside, seems to vibrate visually. Neither light nor dark, neither warm nor cool. It's optically confusing. He tests it on himself, applying it in broken patterns that disrupt facial features. Then he walks into an open field and has another Marine observe him from 200 yards. The report is startling. Manchester is visible when moving, but, when still, seems to blur into the background even in direct sunlight. The effect is so disorienting that the observer has trouble maintaining focus on him. Manchester shows his creation to his platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant James Caruso. Caruso's response is immediate and emphatic. That is absolutely illegal. You cannot use unauthorized materials on your face. What if it's toxic? What if you get captured and the Japs think we're using chemical weapons? This is court-martial material, Manchester. Throw it away. But Caruso doesn't order Manchester to destroy it. And when Manchester volunteers for the suicide reconnaissance mission on April 22nd, Caruso looks the other way when Manchester packs the small tin container in his gear. Manchester applies the paint at 1400 hours on April 22, 1945, in his shell crater. He uses broken patterns, disrupting the outline of his face, neck, and hands. The paste feels greasy, smells faintly of rancid fat and earth. He has no mirror, works by touch, following a pattern he's practiced. At 1415 hours, he begins his approach. The technique is called glacial movement, advancing so slowly that the human eye doesn't register motion. 6 inches per minute. It requires extraordinary muscle control and patience. But Manchester has something no previous scout has had. When he freezes, he effectively disappears. He crosses the first 100 yards in 90 minutes. Japanese soldiers are visible ahead, digging trenches, moving supplies, talking. They're not on high alert. This is their rear area, and they've seen no American scouts penetrate this far in daylight. Manchester moves during moments of distraction, when trucks pass, when officers shout orders, when work parties change shifts. At one point, a Japanese soldier walks within 15 feet of Manchester's position. Manchester is frozen against a slight rise in the ground, his face turned toward the soil. The soldier stops, lights a cigarette, stands for 3 minutes. Manchester doesn't breathe. The soldier moves on, never seeing the American scout lying in plain sight. Manchester reaches the Japanese artillery positions at 1730 hours. He spends 40 minutes memorizing locations, counting guns, noting ammunition dumps. He sketches everything in a small notebook. Then begins the even more dangerous journey back. He returns to American lines at 20:45 hours, after dark. He's been in no man's land for 7 hours, 3 of them in broad daylight within enemy-controlled territory. He delivers his intelligence to the S2 Intelligence section. The coordinates are perfect. The artillery positions are exactly where Manchester reported. But when Manchester's commanding officer, Major Robert Fowler, learns about the unauthorized camouflage, the response is explosive. A meeting is called for the next morning, April 23, 1945, at the division command post. Present are Major Fowler, the division intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Becker, the division quartermaster, Captain Harold Stevens, and 3 camouflage experts recently arrived from the States. Stevens, the quartermaster, is furious. This is a clear violation of regulations. Sergeant Manchester used unauthorized materials that have not been tested for toxicity, for enemy detectability, for any safety standard. He could have been using materials that reflect infrared light. He could have poisoned himself. This sets a dangerous precedent. The camouflage experts agree. Captain Andrew Morrison, trained at Fort Benning's Camouflage School, is dismissive. I've reviewed the formula. It's primitive chemistry with no scientific basis. Any effectiveness was pure luck or due to Manchester's fieldcraft, not the paint. Our approved camouflage compounds are developed by experts with proper testing protocols. The room erupts when Lieutenant Colonel Becker suggests testing Manchester's formula. Morrison stands, pointing at Manchester. You're going to trust the war to some college dropout playing with mud. We have trained specialists, approved materials, established procedures. This is exactly the kind of cowboy nonsense that gets men killed. Major Fowler is caught between regulations and results. The intelligence Manchester provided has already been used to direct a successful artillery strike. 16 Japanese guns were destroyed. But approving unauthorized camouflage could open him to charges of dereliction of duty. The debate rages for 90 minutes. Then the division commander, Major General Lemuel Shepard, Jr., enters the room. Shepard has a reputation as a maverick who values results over procedure. He listens to both sides for 10 minutes, then makes his decision. We're going to test it properly. Captain Morrison, you will design a controlled test using both standard camouflage and Sergeant Manchester's formula. We'll use trained observers, measured distances, timed observations. If Manchester's paint works, we use it. If it doesn't, he faces court-martial for violating regulations. We'll have results in 48 hours. Before we continue with how this illegal experiment saved thousands of lives, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, channel membership, Patreon, or sponsor message. The test is conducted on April 25th, 1945, at a range facility behind American lines. The protocol is rigorous. 12 Marine observers, all trained scouts, positioned at distances from 100 to 500 yards. Test subjects will move across typical Okinawan terrain: red, clay, burned vegetation, coral outcroppings, under full daylight conditions. 4 Marines are selected as test subjects. 2 use standard Marine Corps camouflage, olive drab uniforms with regulation face paint. 2 use Manchester's formula applied in the broken patterns he's developed. The observers don't know which subjects are using which camouflage. The results are documented in official Marine Corps records, now declassified. At 100 yards, observers detect all 4 subjects within 30 seconds when moving, but when subjects freeze in position, the difference is dramatic. Standard camouflage subjects are identified within an average of 12 seconds. Manchester's camouflage subjects take an average of 47 seconds to identify, and 3 observers fail to identify them at all within the 2-minute test window. At 300 yards, the critical distance for most reconnaissance work, the results are even more striking. Standard camouflage subjects are identified in an average of 8 seconds when stationary. Manchester's camouflage subjects take an average of 2 minutes and 18 seconds to identify. 5 of 12 observers never identify them. Captain Morrison, the camouflage expert, is stunned. He requests additional tests. Over the next 3 days, the formula is tested under different lighting conditions, against different backgrounds, with different application patterns. The results are consistent. Manchester's formula provides a 3- to 4-fold improvement in concealment effectiveness compared to standard Marine Corps camouflage. The chemistry is analyzed. What Manchester has accidentally created is a paint that matches not just the color, but the light reflectance properties of Okinawan terrain. The rice powder base diffuses light rather than reflecting it sharply. The mixed pigments create a color that appears different depending on viewing angle and lighting conditions, a phenomenon called metamerism. The broken application pattern disrupts facial recognition. The overall effect is what modern camouflage experts call visual noise. The eye can detect something is there, but struggles to resolve it into a recognizable human shape. On April 30th, 1945, Major General Shepard authorizes immediate production and distribution of Manchester's formula to all reconnaissance units. The Quartermaster Corps is ordered to analyze the formula and produce it in quantity. Manchester is promoted to staff sergeant and assigned to train other scouts in application techniques. The combat results are immediate and dramatic. Before Manchester's camouflage, Marine reconnaissance patrols on Okinawa suffered a 68% casualty rate. After its introduction, the casualty rate drops to 23%, a reduction of 45 percentage points. In the 6 weeks between May 1st and June 15th, 1945, Marine reconnaissance units using the new camouflage complete 147 daylight missions that would have been considered impossible before. The intelligence gathered leads to the destruction of over 300 Japanese artillery positions, saving an estimated 2,000 American lives. The enemy notices. A captured Japanese intelligence report from May 1945, discovered after the war, describes American scouts as ghosts who appear from nowhere. A Japanese artillery officer, Captain Takashi Yamamoto, writes in his diary on May 18, 1945, "American scouts are now operating in daylight within our positions. Our sentries see nothing until it is too late. This new technique is more frightening than their artillery." On June 3, 1945, a mission demonstrates the formula's full potential. Staff Sergeant Manchester and Corporal David Chen are tasked with penetrating Japanese lines near Shuri Castle to verify reports of a command bunker. They apply the camouflage at dawn and begin their approach at 0600 hours. Over the next 8 hours, they cross 1,200 yards of contested terrain, passing within 50 yards of Japanese positions multiple times. They locate the bunker, count personnel, and identify it as a battalion headquarters. They return with intelligence that leads to a direct artillery strike, killing the Japanese battalion commander and his staff. Chen later describes the experience. "We were in broad daylight, sometimes within speaking distance of Japanese soldiers. They looked right at us and saw nothing. It was like being invisible. Without that paint, we'd have been dead in the first 100 yards." The formula is refined and standardized. The Quartermaster Corps produces it in 2-ounce tins, with instructions for application. By July 1945, it's being distributed to Marine reconnaissance units throughout the Pacific. Plans are made to issue it to all infantry units for the invasion of Japan. The invasion never comes. Japan surrenders on August 15, 1945. But Manchester's camouflage has already changed military reconnaissance forever. We'll see how this illegal experiment became standard issue for modern special forces. But first subscribe, like, notification bell, or second sponsor message. The numbers tell the story. Between May 1st and August 15, 1945, Manchester's camouflage formula is used in 284 reconnaissance missions on Okinawa and surrounding islands. Casualty rates for these missions average 21%, compared to 68% for missions using standard camouflage. The intelligence gathered leads to the destruction of over 800 enemy positions and saves an estimated 3,500 American lives. After the war, the formula remains classified. The U.S. military continues to refine it, testing it in different environments: Korean mountains, Vietnamese jungles, Middle Eastern deserts. The basic principle Manchester discovered, matching light reflectance properties rather than just color, becomes the foundation for modern camouflage science. In 1963, the formula is declassified and published in military journals. By then, it has evolved into a family of camouflage compounds, each optimized for different terrain and lighting conditions. British SAS adopts similar formulations in the 1960s. Israeli special forces develop their own version for desert operations. Soviet Spetsnaz creates a variant for Arctic conditions. The modern descendants of Manchester's formula are used today by every special operations unit in the world. Navy SEAL face paint, British SAS camouflage cream, Delta Force concealment compounds all trace their lineage to that homemade paste mixed in an Okinawan schoolhouse in April 1945. In 1987, a Marine Corps historian tracks down William Manchester for an oral history project. Manchester, by then a distinguished professor and acclaimed author, is reluctant to discuss his wartime innovations. When pressed about his contribution to military camouflage, he says, "I just mixed some mud and paint because I didn't want to die. I'm not a hero. The heroes are the men who used it and still didn't come home." But one of those men disagrees. In 1989, David Chen, Manchester's partner on the Shuri Castle mission, attends a Marine Corps reunion. He finds Manchester in the crowd and says simply, "Because of you, I came home. Because of you, I met my wife, raised my children, lived my life. You saved me, Bill. You saved hundreds of us." The official Marine Corps history credits Manchester's formula with reducing reconnaissance casualties by 66% in the final months of the Pacific War. The Quartermaster Corps estimates it saved between 3,000 and 5,000 American lives. Modern military historians argue the real number is higher, as the intelligence gathered using the camouflage prevented countless ambushes and artillery strikes. Manchester never sought recognition for his innovation. He refused medals, declined interviews, and asked that his role remain classified long after the war ended. When the Marine Corps finally published the full story in 1995, Manchester was asked why he'd been so reluctant to discuss his contribution. His answer captures the humility of a generation. "I wasn't trying to revolutionize anything. I was just a scared kid who didn't want to get shot. If what I did helped other scared kids come home, that's enough. That's all that matters." Today, every special operations soldier who applies camouflage paint before a mission is using principles discovered by a 22-year-old college dropout in a bombed-out schoolhouse on Okinawa. The formula has been refined, the chemistry perfected, the application techniques standardized. But the core insight remains Manchester's. True camouflage isn't about matching colors. It's about matching light itself. The lesson extends beyond military tactics. Sometimes the solutions to impossible problems come not from experts following established procedures, but from amateurs willing to question assumptions, experiment with unconventional approaches, and risk everything on an idea that shouldn't work. William Manchester broke regulations, defied experts, and created something illegal that saved thousands of lives. His story reminds us that innovation often requires courage, not just the courage to face enemy fire, but the courage to challenge conventional wisdom when lives are at stake. The next time someone tells you something is impossible, remember the Marine sergeant who proved that you can walk past 400 enemy soldiers in broad daylight if you're willing to think differently about what it means to be invisible.